In a land haunted by shadows, where a monster feasted on men, only one warrior dared to stand against the darkness. His name was Beowulf. His story is not just legend, it is the birth of heroism itself. The tale begins in Denmark, where King Hrothgar, a wise and generous ruler, had built the grandest of mead halls, Heorot. Its golden roof glimmered under the sun, and by night it echoed with songs of warriors, laughter, and the pounding rhythm of drums. It was not just a hall, but a symbol of strength, fellowship, and the king's enduring power. But where joy flourishes, envy and hatred often creep in. Not far from Heorot, in the dark swamps and mist-shrouded fens, lurked a creature born of shadows, Grendel. Twisted by ancient curses, he despised the sound of music and the light of celebration. Each song of triumph struck his heart like fire, for he was doomed to wander in eternal bitterness, cut off from God and men alike. Night after night, as the warriors of Heorot feasted and drank mead until their voices roared, Grendel's fury grew. Finally, one moonless night, he rose from the swamp. Towering, clawed, and covered in matted hair, his eyes burned like coals. With a terrible roar, he stormed into Heorot, tearing the heavy doors from their hinges. In a frenzy of violence, he seized sleeping men, ripped them apart with his iron claws, and carried their broken bodies back to his lair beneath the earth. From that night forward, Heorot was no longer a hall of joy but a house of death. The warriors grew silent. Fear spread through Denmark like a plague. For 12 long winters, Grendel's reign of terror continued, and no man could stand against him. Far across the sea, in the land of the Geats, word of Grendel's terror spread. Among those who heard it was a young warrior of unmatched strength and courage, Beowulf, nephew of King Hrothgar. From childhood, tales of his might had circulated. He was said to possess the strength of 30 men in a single hand grip. Where others faltered, Beowulf sought challenge, for his heart yearned for glory that would echo through the ages. When he learned of Hrothgar's plight, Beowulf saw destiny calling. With bold resolve, he gathered 14 of his bravest companions, warriors who trusted their leader without hesitation. They boarded a longship, its carved prow shaped like a dragon's head, and set sail across the whale road, the restless sea. The winds howled, waves crashed, and salt spray lashed their faces, yet Beowulf stood firm at the helm, guiding his men through the storm. Days later, the coastline of Denmark came into view, steep cliffs rising over the foaming waters, and beyond them, the troubled land of King Hrothgar. A Danish watchman, standing guard on the cliffs, saw the stranger's ship approach. Gripping his spear, he rowed down to the shore, wary yet intrigued, for no one came armed with such boldness unless driven by purpose. Beowulf stepped onto the sand, taller and broader than any man the watchman had seen. His mail gleamed like silver in the daylight, and his words carried the weight of truth. We come not as enemies, but as allies. I, Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, have crossed the sea to cleanse Heorot of the beast that haunts it. Lead us to your king. The watchman, awed by his presence, granted them safe passage. And so, with shield and spear in hand, Beowulf and his men marched toward Heorot, where destiny and the monstrous Grendel awaited. When Beowulf and his warriors entered Heorot, the hall still bore scars of Grendel's wrath. Benches lay shattered, walls bore claw marks, and the once joyful air was heavy with fear. Yet, as the Geats stepped inside, a hush fell over the Danes. These strangers carried themselves like heroes from the sagas. King Hrothgar, aged but noble, rose from his high seat. His eyes, weary from years of sorrow, lit with hope as he welcomed the mighty guest. He remembered Beowulf's father, Ecgtheow, whom he had once aided in a feud. With heartfelt gratitude, Hrothgar embraced the young warrior and said, "Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, you have come to free us from this shadow. If you succeed, your name shall live forever in the songs of men." A grand feast was prepared. Golden goblets of mead were passed, roasted meats were laid upon the tables, and for a moment, laughter returned to Hero. The harp was struck, and the skald sang of heroes past. Yet not all were joyful. Among the Danes sat Unferth, a warrior of proud blood, his heart burning with envy. Unable to contain his bitterness, Unferth rose and jeered at the Geat hero. "Beowulf," he said, his voice sharp with scorn, "you boast of great deeds, but where is your proof? Did you not once lose a foolish swimming contest against Brecker? What glory is there in being bested at sea? If you think to stand against Grendel, beware, many stronger than you have fallen." The hall grew silent. All eyes turned to Beowulf. Yet the Geat wasn't shaken. He rose slowly, towering over the tables, and his voice thundered with calm pride. "Unferth, you twist the truth. I swam beside Brecker for 5 nights, battling storms, sea monsters, and bitter waves. It was not Brecker who bested me, it was the ocean's fury, and still I prevailed, slaying 9 sea beasts before the dawn. What have you done, son of Ecglaf, but sit in this hall and boast while Grendel slaughters your kin?" A murmur swept the hall. Unferth lowered his eyes, silenced by Beowulf's words. Hrothgar's queen, Wealhtheow, stepped forward then, carrying the mead cup, and offered it to Beowulf. With dignity, he accepted, vowing before all, "Tonight, I shall face Grendel. I will fight him with no sword, no shield, for he wields none. Let the night decide our fates." The hall roared with admiration. Yet as darkness gathered beyond the walls, a sense of dread returned, for everyone knew that Grendel was listening. When the feast ended, the Danes withdrew to their homes, fearful of the night. Only the Geats remained within Hero, for Beowulf had sworn to face the terror that came with darkness. The great hall, once filled with laughter, now stood silent, lit only by the dim glow of smouldering torches. Shadows stretched long across the carved beams as the warriors prepared for what was to come. Beowulf, calm and resolute, removed his armor piece by piece. The ring mail clinked as it fell upon the bench, the iron helmet laid aside, and the shining sword rested against the wall. Standing tall in nothing but his warrior's tunic, he spoke with unshaken confidence. "Grendel fears no blade, nor shield. So I shall fight him as he fights me, with strength alone. Let him find me ready, and let the night witness whose hand is stronger." His men spread across the hall, laying their spears and shields beside them. Yet though their courage was great, sleep soon pressed upon their eyes. Only Beowulf remained wakeful, lying in silence, his mind steady, his ears sharp to every sound beyond the timber walls. Outside, the night deepened. The wind howled across the moors, carrying with it the scent of blood and the stench of the marshes. Far in the distance, heavy footsteps stirred, the rhythm of something massive, relentless, and filled with hunger. The creature was coming. Across the swamps, Grendel stirred from his lair. His rage burned hotter than ever, for he had heard the songs of Hero, the voices of strangers who dared to laugh where he had brought only despair. His claws dug into the earth as he strode forward, each step shaking the ground. His eyes glowed with hatred, and his heart thirsted for slaughter. Inside the hall, Beowulf's breath slowed, his muscles coiled like iron. He whispered to himself a silent vow. By dawn, either I will have torn the fiend limb from limb, or I will lie broken beneath his shadow. So be it. The night grew still. The torches sputtered. And then, the heavy doors of Heorot creaked as something pressed against them. The silence inside Heorot shattered with a thunderous crack. The massive doors, bound with iron, flew inward as if struck by a storm. Wood splintered. Hinges screamed. A blast of cold air swept into the hall, carrying with it the reek of the fen, rotting water, old blood, and the stench of death. Through the doorway came Grendel. His bulk was monstrous, towering higher than any man. His skin was thick as iron, slick with the swamp's foul slime, mottled like a serpent's hide. His long arms ended in claws sharp as forged steel, each talon curved for ripping flesh. His eyes, glowing like embers in the dark, fixed upon the sleeping warriors. With terrifying silence, he crossed the threshold. The timbers groaned beneath his weight. He moved not like a beast, but with a cruel cunning, savoring the moment. His jaws stretched into a grin of hunger, teeth jagged and yellow like broken bones. The Geats lay still, unaware. One warrior stirred, blinking at the shadow looming over him, too late. With a swift, savage motion, Grendel seized him, lifted him screaming into the air, and tore him apart. Blood sprayed across the golden walls as the creature fed, gnawing bones, drinking life as if it were nothing but mead. The others awoke in terror, snatching for weapons, but Grendel's hide was proof against blade and spear. Their strikes glanced harmlessly off his monstrous body. He roared, a sound that shook the rafters and made the very fire tremble. And then, his gaze fell upon Beowulf. The Geatish hero did not rise in panic, nor did he flinch. He lay waiting, his body poised like a coiled wolf. As Grendel reached out his taloned hand to seize him, expecting another easy kill, Beowulf's arm shot up like lightning. His grip closed upon the monster's wrist, harder than iron shackles, unbreakable as fate itself. For the first time in his life, Grendel knew fear. The hall shook as man and monster locked in a battle that would be sung of for centuries. Grendel's howl split the night as Beowulf's iron grip crushed down upon his wrist. Never before had the monster been held by mortal hands. He twisted, thrashed, and swung his massive arm, but Beowulf's strength was relentless, as if the roots of the earth itself anchored his body. The warriors of Heorot scrambled back, their weapons useless, their eyes wide with awe. They had seen swords shatter against Grendel's hide, yet here was one man, barehanded, defying the nightmare of the moors. Grendel roared again, shaking the very beams of the hall. He tried to wrench free, his claws gouging deep scars into the oaken floor. But Beowulf tightened his grip, every sinew in his body burning with raw power. The tendons in Grendel's arms strained like ropes about to snap. Now you face one who fears no death. Beowulf cried, his voice booming above the chaos, echoing like thunder. Your slaughter ends tonight, demon. With a violent surge, he dragged Grendel closer. Their bodies collided, monster and man, each testing the other in sheer strength. The hall quaked with the fury of their struggle. Benches splintered, golden goblets clattered across the floor, the fire roared higher as if feeding on the battle's rage. Grendel, desperate, lashed out with his free hand, claws slicing through air, striking walls and warriors alike. Stone and wood splintered under his fury, yet Beowulf would not release him. He bent the monster's arm backward, bones grinding, muscles tearing. The sound was like thunder cracking across the sky, Grendel's howl of agony, primal and unearthly. Never had he known such pain. Blood dark as tar seeped from his flesh, smoking as it touched the firelit floor. Still Beowulf pressed harder, driven by fate, by honor, by the promise of triumph. Grendel's immense strength, once unstoppable, faltered beneath the hero's grip. For the first time, the predator was prey. The warriors, watching in awe and terror, whispered the truth already clear. Beowulf was no ordinary man. He was a force of destiny. Grendel thrashed wildly, his roars shaking the rafters, his claws gouging the stone walls of Heorot. The hall that had withstood storms and sieges now trembled under the fury of the monster's despair. Warriors clung to pillars, their eyes wide as they watched the unthinkable, Grendel, scourge of the night, being overpowered by a single man. Beowulf's grip was merciless. He twisted harder, the sinews in his arms bulging like iron cables, his teeth clenched with unyielding resolve. Sweat poured down his face, but his gaze blazed with fire. The destiny of this battle was clear. One would break, and it would not be him. Then it happened. With a sound that split the air like the crack of mountains breaking apart, Grendel's shoulder gave way. Bone snapped, tendon tore, and blood burst forth in a torrent blacker than midnight. Beowulf ripped the creature's arm clean from its socket, holding it high like a trophy for gods and men alike. Grendel's scream was unlike anything mortal ears had ever endured. It was a sound of fury, terror, and despair all at once, the death cry of a creature that had believed itself eternal. Staggering backward, wounded beyond healing, Grendel's immense frame smashed through the hall's great doors. Bleeding, broken, howling into the night, the monster fled into the darkness of the moors. Each step left a trail of steaming blood across the earth, proof of his defeat. Inside Heorot, silence fell. The warriors, still clutching their weapons, stared in disbelief at Beowulf, who stood tall in the flickering firelight, the monstrous arm dripping in his grasp. Thus ends the terror of Heorot, Beowulf thundered. His voice rang with triumph, and for the first time in years, hope lit the eyes of Hrothgar's people. The hall erupted with shouts of victory. Drums pounded, horns blared, and songs already began to weave around Beowulf's name. But in the distance, across the moors, Grendel's cries still echoed, a dying beast crawling toward his fate. And though none yet knew it, the vengeance of blood was already stirring. For in the depths of the fen, Grendel's mother waited. At dawn, the hall of Heorot, once haunted by sorrow, now thundered with joy. The Danes gathered in awe, pressing close to see the grisly prize nailed high above the doors, Grendel's torn arm, claw, and shoulder, a grotesque monument to victory. The blackened blood still dripped down the wood, yet none turned away. To them it was not horror, but freedom carved into flesh. King Hrothgar, old and wise, rose from his high seat with tears shining in his eyes. "Never in all my years," he said, his voice trembling yet proud, "has a warrior come to us with such strength, such courage. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, you are more than a hero, you are a deliverer of nations." The hall roared in answer, the sound of men who had tasted despair now reborn with hope. Harps were strung, songs lifted high, and the skalds, poets of memory, began weaving Beowulf's tale into the golden fabric of legend even as he still breathed. Golden mead was poured into jeweled cups, the horns overflowing as warriors clashed them together. The firelight danced across polished shields and swords, across the faces of men who had long forgotten laughter but now roared with it. Hrothgar ordered treasures to be brought forth, rings of gold, finely wrought armor, and a banner embroidered with the sun. He placed them before Beowulf with reverence, a king honoring one who had done the impossible. With these gifts, we bind our friendship in gold, he declared. Your name shall be remembered as long as this hall stands. Beowulf bowed, though his pride burned bright, for within him lived not arrogance but the iron knowledge of his worth. Around him, the Geats, his loyal band, drank deep, their hearts swelling with pride at their lord's triumph. That night, Heorot was alive with music and mirth. The rafters shook not with Grendel's rage but with human song, the voices of the free. For the first time in years, men and women slept within those walls without fear. Yet in the deep marshes, in waters darker than their grave, another shadow stirred. Grendel's mother, the ancient hag of the mere, heard the dying wails of her son and tasted the scent of his spilled blood on the wind. In Heorot, the Danes celebrated. But beyond the hall, vengeance was awakening. Beneath the murky waters of the fen, in a lair carved from black stone and twisted roots, a figure stirred. The air was thick with the stench of decay and ancient magic. Grendel's mother, a creature older and deadlier than her son, rose from the dark depths. Her eyes burned with fury, pale and luminous like the moon's reflection on poisoned water. The death of her child had torn a hole in her heart, a wound so raw it radiated hatred. They have dared to strike my son," she hissed, her voice a haunting melody of rage. The swamp trembled beneath her anger, and the waters boiled as she moved with supernatural swiftness. Her claws, jagged like the roots of dead trees, dripped with black ichor. She sensed the hall, Heorot, glowing with the fires of human celebration. The laughter, the music, the clinking of golden cups, it was poison to her ears. Every sound stoked the flames of vengeance. She had watched her son fall, helpless beneath the strength of one man, and now she would ensure that the balance of terror was restored. As night fell, the wind carried her presence like a shadow across the moors. Trees bent, the reeds of the marsh whispered, and animals scurried in instinctive dread. She emerged from the waters, her long hair floating like dark kelp, her body moving with a fluid, predatory grace. She was not merely a mother avenging a child, she was a force of ancient wrath, a storm incarnate. Above, in Heorot, no one sensed her approach. The hall had grown complacent in its triumph. Beowulf, strong and untested by the full fury of a mother seeking vengeance, rested unaware. Yet the air itself carried a chill, a warning unheeded. In the shadows of the mere, the hag whispered to the night, "Let them taste the fury of the deep, and let the waters claim their fear." The hour of reckoning had come. Night had fallen over Heorot, and the hall slept in false security. Torches guttered, shadows danced lazily across the walls, and the warriors' heavy breaths echoed like distant drums. Yet beneath the hall, in the black waters of the mere, a silent predator moved with terrifying purpose. Grendel's mother surged from the depths, her body slicing through the water like a shadow of doom. Her claws, jagged and dripping with swamp-black ichor, reached for anything that dared stand in her way. Trees near the shore snapped as she climbed from the waters, leaving a trail of dark foam and shattered reeds. Her eyes burned with maternal rage, her every movement a promise of destruction. She struck without warning. The doors of Heorot crashed inward, splintering under her immense strength. Warriors leapt to defend the hall, but she was faster, stronger, a whirlwind of vengeance. One by one, they fell before her claws, screams piercing the night as terror gripped the remaining defenders. Beowulf rose, sensing the darkness before seeing it. His eyes caught the glimmer of her pale, furious face, and his heart raced with the thrill of the fight. Unlike Grendel, this foe was cunning, her movements fluid and unpredictable. She twisted, lunged, and slashed, tearing through the hall with supernatural fury. The smell of damp earth and blood filled the air. Firelight flickered against her twisted form, revealing the monstrous beauty of her rage. Every strike carried the weight of a mother's wrath, every claw swipe a shadow of the swamp itself. Beowulf readied himself, steadying his breathing, feeling the pulse of destiny in his veins. This was no ordinary battle. This was fate itself made flesh, a test of courage, strength, and wit. And so, the clash began, man against monster, courage against fury, the legacy of Grendel's terror now complete in his mother's vengeful hands. Beowulf wasted no time. As the hall lay in chaos, he leapt into action, his heart steady, his mind sharp. The warriors scrambled behind him, but he knew this was a battle he must face alone. Grendel's mother had retreated, dragging the hall's fallen into the black waters of her lair. Without hesitation, Beowulf dove into the icy mere. The water swallowed him, cold and suffocating, the surface above darkened by the shadows of the trees. He felt the pull of currents and unseen roots, the pressure of water thick as stone, yet his resolve never faltered. Sword in hand, he plunged deeper, guided by the faint shimmer of the hag's movements. The mere twisted around him like a labyrinth of death. Dark shapes lurked in the corners, strange, monstrous creatures, guardians of the deep, remnants of ancient curses. They hissed and lunged, but Beowulf's strength was unmatched. One swing of his sword and they scattered or perished, leaving him to the heart of the lair. At last, he reached the cavern where Grendel's mother waited. The walls were slick with slime, lit faintly by a ghostly glow from the water. Here, the air was thick with the scent of decay, and the echo of her rage reverberated like thunder. She rose from the black depths, taller, more terrifying than before, her hair floating like dark seaweed, her eyes glowing with a hatred older than any man. Beowulf raised his sword, its steel catching the dim light. He spoke aloud, not out of fear, but of determination. This night ends here. You shall not escape, and your terror will be no more. With that, he charged into the abyss, and the battle beneath the waters began, a duel of gods and monsters, of mortal strength versus ancient wrath, in a world where light scarcely touched and death lurked in every shadow. The cavern was alive with shadows, the water black as ink, boiling with rage and fear. Grendel's mother lunged, claws slashing, teeth snapping, her monstrous form a blare of fury. Beowulf met her charge head-on, his grip firm on his sword, nagling, though the weapon trembled in his hands against her supernatural strength. They clashed like titans, the sound of metal against claw ringing through the underground chamber. Water churned around them, rising in frothy waves as they twisted and grappled. Every swing of the sword met her thick hide, every strike of her claws threatened to tear him apart. Yet Beowulf's strength was more than mere muscle, It was destiny forged in fire and courage. Hours seemed to pass in the timeless darkness. Beowulf dodged, parried, and countered, feeling every strike as a test of his will. Then, glimmering high above, he noticed a massive, ancient sword, hung on the wall like a relic of the gods themselves. Summoning every ounce of energy, he grabbed it. Its weight was immense, yet it felt guided, almost alive in his hands. With a roar that echoed like thunder, Beowulf swung the divine blade. The edge caught the light of the murky waters, slicing through Grendel's mother's defenses. Her shriek pierced the cavern, a sound of rage, pain, and disbelief. The strike was true, severing the life that had terrorized Heorot and claiming the victory only a hero could achieve. Grendel's mother sank into the murky depths, her body dissolving into shadow and mist. Silence fell, broken only by the distant drip of water and Beowulf's heavy breathing. The hero had triumphed, not just with strength, but with courage, cunning, and the heart of a man destined to become legend. Rising to the surface, Beowulf carried with him Grendel's severed head, a grim trophy of victory and a warning to all who would threaten Heorot. The waters of the mere stilled, as if acknowledging the end of an ancient terror. Yet even in victory, the shadow of fate lingered. Beowulf knew the price of glory was never free, and that time, as ever, would bring new trials. Beowulf emerged from the mere, soaked, exhausted, yet triumphant. Dawn's first light kissed the walls of Heorot, casting the hall in a golden glow that seemed to celebrate the hero's victory. The Danes crowded the hall, their eyes wide with awe, their voices trembling as they hailed the man who had faced terror itself and returned victorious. King Hrothgar rose, leaning on his ornate staff, his aged face alight with pride and relief. "Beowulf," he declared, his voice echoing through the hall, "you have rid our land of a curse that haunted us for years. You have shown courage beyond all measure, and your name shall live forever in our songs and tales." Hrothgar presented Beowulf with treasures beyond imagining, gold rings, gleaming armors, a banner embroidered with the sun, and precious gems that court the morning light. Each gift symbolized honor, gratitude, and the eternal bond forged between the Geats and the Danes. The hall erupted in celebration. Warriors clashed their swords in the air, trumpets blared, and the skalds wove songs of Beowulf's deeds into intricate rhymes, already destined to be sung for generations. The mead flowed freely, and laughter, long absent, filled Heorot once more. Yet beneath the joy, Hrothgar's eyes held a shadow of wisdom. He pulled Beowulf aside and spoke softly. "Take pride in your triumph, young hero, but remember, glory is fleeting, and fate spares no man forever. The world is full of beasts yet unknown, and your courage will be tested again." Beowulf nodded, absorbing the weight of the king's words. Triumph was sweet, but he knew destiny was never finished with those who dared greatness. Even as heroes celebrated, the winds whispered of challenges still to come, and the shadow of future battles loomed over the horizon. The hall of Heorot had been saved, but the story of Beowulf's life was far from over. After weeks of celebration and feasting, Beowulf bid farewell to King Hrothgar and the Danes. The ship carrying him and his 14 loyal Geatish warriors cut through the silver waves, sails snapping in the wind as they left the shores of Denmark behind. Beowulf's heart was heavy with both pride and contemplation. He had proven his strength, honored his father's name, and earned the eternal gratitude of a people he had saved, but destiny still whispered of trials yet to come. Upon returning to Geatland, he was welcomed as a hero. Word of his deeds had spread like wildfire, The warrior who had slain Grendel and his mother was now more than a man. He was a legend in life. The people gathered in villages and meadows, singing songs of the hero's courage, offering gifts of fine armor, horses, and gold. Even King Hrothgar, his uncle and sovereign, regarded him with a mixture of awe and fatherly pride. As time passed, Beowulf's strength and wisdom grew. He became a stalwart protector of the Geats, solving disputes, defending borders, and ensuring that his people flourished. The deeds of his youth, recounted in mead halls and marketplaces, became lessons in courage, loyalty, and honor. Eventually, when King Hrothgar passed away, Beowulf ascended to the throne. His reign was marked not just by the sword, but by wisdom, fairness, and foresight. He ruled with the same courage that had carried him through Heorot, yet tempered by the understanding that true power required more than brute strength. It demanded vision, patience, and the protection of one's people above all else. Though he now bore the crown, Beowulf never forgot the lessons of the mere, the screams of Grendel, or the shadowed waters where his greatest battle had begun. The echoes of those victories remained in his mind, a reminder that glory was earned, and that heroes were forever bound to destiny's call. For many years, Geatland thrived under Beowulf's wise and courageous rule. Villages flourished, the fields yielded abundant harvests, and the people felt safe beneath the shadow of their king. The great hall of Heorot had become a distant memory, yet its lessons remained alive in Beowulf's heart. Courage, honor, and the ever-present knowledge that evil could strike when least expected. The hero, now king, spent his days not in battle but in governance. He settled disputes among his people, forged alliances with neighboring lands, and honored the memory of the warriors who had fought beside him. His court echoed with laughter, debate, and song. Minstrels sang of his victories, and the stories of Grendel and the mere became legends passed to the next generation. Yet even in this era of peace, Beowulf's instincts never dulled. The wind whispered warnings of distant dangers, and the earth trembled beneath unseen forces. Age had strengthened his wisdom, but reminded him of mortality. He knew that the world still harbored monsters, both literal and metaphorical, and that every reign, no matter how just, was bound to be tested. In quiet moments, he would walk the cliffs overlooking the sea, gazing at the horizon. The sun would glint off the waves, and Beowulf would remember the fury of the mere, the roar of Grendel, the shadow of the mother, and the fragile balance between man and fate. Even in triumph, he remained vigilant, for the lessons of the past had taught him that peace was temporary, and that the courage of heroes must endure beyond the clamour of victory. Thus, a long era of prosperity reigned, yet a shadow lingered, a hint of fire, a warning carried on the wind, whispering of a final trial that awaited the hero in his twilight years, the awakening of a dragon, a beast born of greed and fury, destined to challenge even Beowulf's legendary strength. Decades had passed since Beowulf's triumphs over Grendel and the mere hag. The king, now older, bore the marks of time on his face and in the strength of his limbs. Yet his heart remained steadfast, vigilant for the threats that could emerge from the shadows. In the dark heart of a distant Barrow, hidden beneath the roots of a mountain, a treasure long forgotten began to stir. The hoarded gold, jewels, and artifacts lay silent for centuries, but the greed of men had awakened a creature older than kingdoms themselves, a dragon, slumbering in rage, whose scales shimmered like molten bronze and eyes burned like twin suns. Its lair trembled as it rose, stretching enormous wings, exhaling a heat that set the cavern alight. The people of Geatland soon felt the dragon's wrath. Villages on the outskirts burned as the beast's fiery breath scorched fields and forests. Smoke darkened the sky, and the cries of the people echoed like wails of the damned. The terror was unlike any Grendel or mere mother had inflicted. It was fire incarnate, destruction drawn from the depths of the earth itself. Hearing of the devastation, Beowulf knew that his final test had arrived. Though years had slowed his body, his courage and honor remained undiminished. He summoned his loyal warriors and equipped himself in the finest armor, the weight of gold and iron reminding him of the stakes. In his heart, he understood that this battle might claim his life, but to protect his people, he would face the dragon without fear. As he approached the mountain lair, the air grew thick with smoke, the sky dark with ash. The dragon's roar split the heavens, shaking the very stones beneath his feet. Flames licked the cliffside, and the wind carried the stench of sulfur and fire. Beowulf tightened his grip on his sword, nagling, feeling the pulse of destiny coursing through him. This was not a battle for glory alone. It was a test of all he had become, the final confrontation between man, monster, and the inexorable passage of fate. The dragon emerged from its cavern, wings stretching wide, scales glinting like molten metal in the fiery glow. Smoke and sparks billowed as it bellowed, a sound that rattled mountains and set the hearts of men trembling. Its eyes, fierce and intelligent, locked onto Beowulf, measuring the hero with the calculating stare of a timeless predator. Beowulf stood firm, sword in hand, nagling gleaming even in the firelight. He charged, every step echoing with the weight of years and the destiny that had followed him since the halls of Heorot. Arrows and spears flew from his loyal warriors, but the dragon's scales were impervious. Fire erupted from its maw, licking at the stone and earth, forcing men to dive for cover. The hero dodged and weaved, his strength strained but unbroken. He struck at the beast with all his might, nagling biting into a scale, but even his legendary power could not pierce the impenetrable hide entirely. The dragon lashed with its tail, knocking warriors aside, crushing shields, and sending clouds of molten dust into the air. In the chaos, Beowulf's closest companion, Wiglaf, refused to flee. He joined his king, standing by him with unwavering courage, delivering blows and keeping the dragon's attention focused. Together, they fought as one, a bond of loyalty and heroism stronger than fear. The battle raged for what felt like hours. The heat, the fire, the relentless fury of the dragon tested every fiber of Beowulf's being. Sweat mingled with blood, armor scorched, and strength waned, but still the hero pressed on, driven by duty, honor, and the love of his people. Finally, summoning every last ounce of his strength, Beowulf drove nagling deep into the dragon's chest, piercing its heart. The beast howled in pain and rage, flames sputtering as its life force drained. With one final strike, the dragon collapsed, shaking the ground in death throes, leaving the mountain silent except for the crackling of dying fire. But victory came at a cost. Beowulf, gravely wounded by the dragon's bite, sank to the ground. His life, like the embers of the dragon's flames, dimmed slowly, his final act one of bravery, leaving his people safe and his legacy eternal. Beowulf lay upon the scorched earth, the dragon's blood staining his hands and armor. Smoke curled around him, mingling with the scent of ash and molten stone. Wiglaf knelt beside him, supporting the hero whose life was slipping away, the weight of years and battles finally claiming their toll. "My friend, my king," a Wiglaf whispered, voice trembling, "your courage has saved us all. Your name will never fade." Beowulf smiled faintly, eyes reflecting both pride and sorrow. "I have lived as a man. I have fought as a warrior, but it is the people, the land, and loyalty that endure. Remember them, he murmured. Every word bore the weight of wisdom earned in countless battles, from Grendel's terror to the dragon's fire. With a final breath, Beowulf closed his eyes. The hero who had faced monsters, death, and fate itself was gone, leaving behind a legacy etched into the hearts of men. His deeds, the slaying of Grendel, the vanquishing of the mere hag, and the courage against the dragon, would be sung in mead halls, whispered by storytellers, and passed down for generations as the definition of true heroism. The Geats mourned deeply. They carried their king to a high cliff overlooking the sea, building a towering funeral pyre. Flames roared to the heavens, consuming the body and honoring the life of the greatest of heroes. Smoke spiraled upward, a bridge between the mortal world and the realm of legend, and ships lined the shore to carry treasures and memories into the waves. Even as sorrow gripped the people, admiration and reverence burned brighter. Beowulf's courage, honor, and loyalty became eternal symbols of heroism. Though his body returned to the earth, his spirit lived in every story, every song, and every whisper of bravery yet to come. Thus ended the life of Beowulf, but his legend, immortal, unyielding, and inspiring, endured forever. The funeral fires faded into glowing embers, but the memory of Beowulf burned brighter than ever. The Geats stood upon the cliffs, gazing out at the restless sea, their voices heavy with grief yet rising in solemn song. They sang of his victories, of the night Grendel fell beneath his strength, of the mere woman slain in her haunted lair, and of the final struggle against the dragon whose fire could not quench his spirit. Minstrels crafted verses to carry across the generations, their harps echoing like thunder through mead halls. Children listened wide-eyed, learning that true greatness was not in living long, but in living bravely. Every tale spoke of honor, loyalty, and sacrifice, the essence of Beowulf's life. On the high cliff, a great barrow was raised, filled with treasures taken from the dragon's hoard. Golden cups, jeweled swords, and gleaming helms were sealed within, so that the world would forever know the wealth he had won and the glory he had earned. The mound rose against the sky, a beacon for sailors far across the sea, a reminder that a hero had walked the earth and faced monsters that lurked in darkness. For years after, the Geats spoke his name with reverence, calling him not just a king, but the protector of men, the shield against chaos. Though the future seemed uncertain without his strength, his memory gave them courage to endure, and his story became their guiding flame. Time passed, as it always does, but legends are not bound by years. Long after his bones had turned to dust, Beowulf's name lived on, carried by winds across seas, etched into the hearts of warriors, and whispered in the quiet corners of mead halls. His story became a bridge between men and gods, between mortals and immortality. He was remembered as the slayer of Grendel, the avenger of Hrothgar's hall, the conqueror of the deep mere, and the fearless king who faced a dragon alone for the sake of his people. Yet above all, he was remembered as a man who lived by honor, whose strength served not only himself, but all those who placed their trust in him. Generations later, when storms raged and shadows grew long, men still raised their cups in his name. Beowulf, they said, are the mightiest of heroes, the bravest of kings, the eternal guardian. His barrow on the cliff stood untouched, a silent monument of stone and treasure, lit by the rising and setting sun. And so, Beowulf's saga, woven from valor, sacrifice, and the endless struggle against darkness, was never forgotten. It passed from voice to voice, from land to land, until it became more than history. It became myth. It became legend. It became eternity. For as long as men dream of courage, Beowulf will live.